Ever notice how some new things just seem to explode, while others, even great ideas, kind of fizzle out?
Oh, absolutely. Like, think about a new app everyone's suddenly using versus maybe some smart home gadget that just sits on the shelf.
Exactly. What makes one catch on and not the other? Is there like a magic formula?
Well, maybe not magic, but there's definitely a science to it. It's often less about how good the thing is and more about how it spreads, how people adopt it.
Right. And that's what we're digging into today, the diffusion of innovations theory from E.M. Rogers. It's this really powerful way to look at why some ideas or technologies just take off.
And why others don't. We're drawing on quite a bit of research here, academic articles, some specifically looking at things like educational tech.
Okay, so our mission then is to really get a handle on the main ideas of this theory. We want to give you a framework, a way to analyze why things spread the way they do.
Yeah, what are those sort of invisible forces deciding if something becomes huge or just disappears? Let's jump in.
Okay, let's start with the basics, core concepts. What's an innovation in this theory?
Right. So an innovation isn't necessarily something brand new to the world. It's defined as an idea, practice, or object that is perceived as new.
Ah, perceived. So it just has to feel new to the person or group adopting it.
Exactly. Perception is key. And then there's diffusion. What's that about?
Diffusion. Yeah.
Diffusion is the process where that innovation gets communicated. It happens through certain channels over a period of time, and all within what Rogers calls a social system.
Communication channels, time, social system.
Got it. You also mentioned diffusion versus dissemination. What's the difference there?
Good question. Think of diffusion as like natural spread, wind carrying seeds. Dissemination is more intentional, like a gardener planting seeds.
Okay, so dissemination is the planned effort to spread something.
Precisely. It's the organized rollout, the marketing campaign, the training program. It often leads to diffusion, but it's more deliberate. That makes sense. Natural versus planned. And the communication channels, you said, some are more powerful than others.
Yeah, this is fascinating. The theory suggests, and research often backs this up, that face-to-face communication, talking to a friend or colleague, is often way more influential in the decision to adopt than mass media.
Word of mouth really matters. I guess that feels more trustworthy.
It often does. That personal connection, that recommendation from someone you know. And of course, this whole thing takes time. It's not instant.
Right. Time is a big factor. Things don't just become mainstream overnight.
No, they spread gradually. Communication keeps happening. People influence each other. It weaves its way through society.
And that social system, where it happens, what defines that?
So a social system is basically a group of connected people working towards a common goal. Think a school, a company department, an online community.
Okay, so groups with their own norms, structures, maybe leaders.
Exactly. They have established ways of doing things, and any new idea has to kind of navigate that existing structure, those norms, the influence of opinion leaders within the group.
And it's not just about deciding yes once, is it? The theory looks longer term.
Right. It covers the whole life cycle. There's adoption, the initial decision, then maintenance, actually using it, sustainability, does it stick around even after the initial push, and institutionalization becoming like standard practice.
Okay, a whole journey. So we've got the basics, perceived newness, communication over time in the social system, personal channels matter, time's involved, and there's a life cycle. Now, the really interesting part for me is that people don't all adopt at the same time.
No, absolutely not. And that's one of the most famous parts of the theory, the adopter categories. Rogers found people tend to fall into predictable groups based on how quickly they adopt. It forms a kind of bell curve.
Okay, let's break down these groups. Who's first?
First up, you have the innovators. These are the real pioneers, the risk takers, maybe about 2.5% of any given population.
The ones who love trying something new just because it is new.
Pretty much. They're adventurous, maybe a bit outside the mainstream social system sometimes. They just want the info, the tech specs. They don't need much persuading.
Okay, innovators, 2.5%. Who's next?
Next are the early adopters, about 13.5%. These folks are crucial. They're respected. They're opinion leaders within their social system.
Ah, so these are the people others look to.
Exactly. They embrace change early, but they're more thoughtful than innovators. They want to see the benefits, understand how it works in practice. They're key influencers.
Right. Win them over, and others might follow.
Yeah.
Then comes a bigger chunk.
Yep, the early majority. That's about 34%. These people adopt before the average person, but they're definitely not pioneers. They need proof.
Proof like a what?
Evidence it works, success stories, maybe testimonials from those early adopters they respect. They want to know it's not too risky, that's becoming, a safer bet.
Okay, early majority needs evidence.
Yeah.
Then another big group.
The late majority, also about 34%. These folks are generally skeptical of innovation.
They wait until almost everyone else has done it.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
They often adopt out of necessity or because of peer pressure. They need to see it's really widespread, maybe get endorsements from trusted sources. They don't want to be left behind.
Makes sense. Skeptical, needs social proof. And the last group.
Finally, you have the laggards, about 16%. These are the most traditional, very cautious about change.
They might resist it quite strongly.
Often, yes. They might only adopt when the old way is completely gone or when there's overwhelming evidence, maybe even combined with emotional appeals about connecting with family or something fundamental. They're the hardest to convince.
Wow. Innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, laggards. It really highlights how different people approach change.
Absolutely. And understanding these categories is critical if you're trying to introduce something new. You tailor your message, your approach, depending on who you're trying to reach at what stage.
You can't just use one message for everyone. Okay, so that's the who. What about the what? The characteristics of the innovation itself must matter too, right?
Hugely. The theory identifies 5 key attributes of an innovation that strongly predict how quickly it will be adopted.
5 attributes. Let's hear them.
Okay, first is relative advantage. Is the innovation perceived as better than the idea it supersedes? Better could mean more efficient, cheaper, more status-giving.
And again, it's about perception, how the user sees it.
Exactly, it's subjective. What's advantageous to one person might not be to another, so you really need to show the benefit from their point of view.
Okay, relative advantage. What's number 2?
Compatibility. How consistent is the innovation with existing values, past experiences, and the needs of potential adopters?
So does it fit in? Does it feel familiar, or does it require a massive shift in thinking or behavior?
Right. The more compatible, the less friction, the faster the adoption. If it aligns with how people already do things or what they believe, it's an easier sell. Adaptability helps here too. Can it be slightly modified to fit better?
Makes perfect sense. Easier to adopt something that fits. Third attribute.
Complexity, or maybe the lack of it. How difficult is the innovation to understand and use?
Simplicity. Keep it simple, stupid.
Basically, yes. The simpler an innovation is perceived to be, the more readily it spreads. If it seems overwhelming, people will hesitate. Breaking it down into phases can help manage that complexity.
Yeah, a gentle learning curve. Okay, so relative advantage, compatibility, simplicity. What's fourth?
Tryability. Can people experiment with the innovation on a limited basis? Can they try it out before fully committing?
Like a free trial or a pilot program, letting people dip their toes in.
Exactly. Trying reduces uncertainty and risk. If you can test drive it, you feel more confident about adopting it fully.
Okay, tryability. And the last one.
Observability. How visible are the results of using the innovation to others?
Can people see that it works or that others are using it and benefiting?
Precisely. If the benefits are visible, it sparks curiosity, encourages discussion, and provides social proof. Seeing your neighbor's cool new gadget working well makes you more interested.
Okay, so relative advantage, compatibility, complexity or simplicity, tryability, and observability. Those 5 things really shape the adoption curve.
They're powerful predictors. Get those right, and you significantly increase your chances.
Now, we've talked about the groups and the attributes. What about the individual's journey? Is there a process people go through when they decide to adopt?
Yes, the theory outlines a 5-step process that individuals typically move through mentally when encountering an innovation.
Okay, 5 steps. Let's walk through them. Step 1.
Awareness. Simple enough, you just become aware the innovation exists. You've heard the name, maybe seen an ad, but that's it. No real info yet.
Just knowing it's out there. Step 2.
Persuasion. Here, you get interested. You start actively seeking information, maybe asking questions, reading reviews. You're forming an attitude towards it, positive or negative.
Forming an opinion, weighing the pros and cons in your head. Okay. Step 3.
Decision. This is the crunch point. You weigh the advantages and disadvantages, considering your own situation, and decide to either adopt the innovation or reject it.
The go-no-go moment. What happens after deciding yes?
Step 4 is implementation. You actually put the innovation to use. You try it out, maybe adapt it slightly, figure out how it works in practice. This is where you might run into problems or need more info.
Getting your hands dirty, figuring it out,
Yeah.
and the final step.
Confirmation. After using it for a while, you seek reinforcement for your decision. You look at the results, maybe talk to peers who've also adopted it, and decide if you're going to stick with it long term or, maybe discontinue using it if it didn't work out.
So it's not over after implementation. You're still evaluating.
Right. It's an ongoing process of seeking confirmation and resolving any lingering doubts. Peer influence is often really important at this stage, too.
Okay, awareness, persuasion, decision, implementation, confirmation. A clear path. Now let's connect this theory to something concrete. Our sources talked a lot about educational technology, especially thinking back to the pandemic shift.
Yes, absolutely. The diffusion of innovations theory provides a really useful lens for understanding what happened when faculty suddenly had to teach online.
Suddenly, the relative advantage of online tools seemed huge, right? Or at least the necessity was huge.
Exactly. The perceived usefulness shot up overnight because there was no other option. But that didn't mean smooth sailing for everyone.
No,
Hmm.
I bet not. What hurdles did the theory help explain?
Well, think about complexity. Faculty needed new technical skills, new ways of teaching online. That was a big hurdle for many. And triability was often limited. There wasn't much time to experiment before going live.
Right, thrown in the deep end. And the sources mentioned faculty often stuck with familiar teaching methods just delivered online.
That points straight to compatibility. It felt less complex and more manageable to adapt existing pedagogical approaches rather than trying to master completely new online-specific techniques immediately. It lowered the barrier.
That makes sense. This also ties into another model mentioned, TAM, the technology acceptance model.
Yeah, TAM is relevant here. It basically says two main things predict whether someone will use technology: perceived usefulness and perceived ease of use.
Okay, is it useful and is it easy?
Right. During the pandemic, perceived usefulness was sky high due to necessity. But for sustained use, perceived ease of use becomes critical. If teachers found the tools constantly difficult or frustrating,
They wouldn't stick with them long term, even if they were technically useful. That links back to complexity in Rogers' theory.
exactly. Ease of use is closely related to low complexity.
The sources also brought up TPACK, technological, pedagogical, and content knowledge. How does that fit in?
TPACK highlights that truly effective teaching with technology requires teachers to blend three kinds of knowledge: understanding the tech, T, understanding teaching methods, P, and understanding their subject matter, C.
It's not enough just to know your subject or just know how to teach or just know the tool. You need all three working together.
Precisely. And you need to understand the intersections between them. How does this specific tool help teach this specific concept using this pedagogical approach? That's the sweet spot.
So adopting EdTech effectively means developing that integrated TPACK knowledge.
Yes. Although, one critique of TPACK that came up is that it can be a bit teacher-centric. It focuses heavily on the teacher's knowledge and maybe doesn't emphasize the learner's experience quite as much.
Interesting. Is there another framework that maybe addresses that, especially for mobile learning?
Well, one framework mentioned was CSAM, Collaborative Situated Active Mobile Learning Design. It's specifically aimed at providing more practical guidance for designing mobile learning experiences.
Collaborative, situated, active, mobile. Okay. How does that help?
It focuses on using mobile tech for learning that involves students working together, collaborative, learning in real-world contexts, situated, and actively doing things, active. The idea is that by giving teachers this clearer framework, it increases their confidence, their self-efficacy in using mobile learning.
So it might tackle the complexity and maybe enhance triability by giving clearer steps, or maybe observability if the activities are engaging.
Potentially, yes. It aims to make mobile learning pedagogy more concrete and less intimidating.
And did the research on CSAM training show it worked?
The studies mentioned suggested that teachers who got professional development based on CSAM did report feeling more confident, especially in designing mobile learning strategies and engaging students. It seemed to help bridge that TPACK gap, particularly around the pedagogical use of the technology.
So good training, maybe based on a framework like CSAM, can really help with adoption. What else helps teachers adopt tech?
Something that came up repeatedly was the importance of informal peer support. Just being able to ask a colleague down the hall, share tips, troubleshoot together.
Back to those communication channels within the social system. That network matters.
Absolutely. It makes the implementation stage feel less isolating and risky. Knowing you have backup helps overcome that complexity barrier.
Okay. And finally, Tony Bates's work on innovation and online learning was mentioned. What were his key points?
Bates talks about common myths like innovation just happens or only geniuses innovate. He also highlights barriers often found in institutions.
Areas like,
Things like lack of clear leadership or vision for innovation, rigid organizational structures, not enough training or resources, fear of failure. These are all part of that social system context that can either help or hinder diffusion.
so the environment really matters. It's not just individual choices.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
He also suggests strategies like thinking holistically, having clear strategic goals for innovation, providing ongoing support and training, and fostering a culture where experimentation is okay.
It sounds like creating an environment where those 5 attributes, relative advantage, compatibility, low complexity, triability, observability, are more likely to be perceived positively.
Exactly. It's about creating fertile ground for good ideas to take root and spread.
Okay, so wrapping this up, the diffusion of innovations theory gives us this incredibly useful way to understand how new things spread. It's about perceived newness, communication, time, social systems.
The different adopter categories, those 5 key attributes of the innovation itself, and that 5-step process individuals go through.
And we've seen how it applies directly to things like educational technology adoption, especially when you layer in models like TAM, TPACK, and maybe CSAM to understand the specifics of usefulness, ease of use, and necessary knowledge.
Understanding these dynamics can help anyone trying to introduce change, whether it's a new technology, a new process, or just a new idea.
So final thought for you listening. Think about some recent innovation you've encountered, maybe a new app, a work process, even a social trend. How does this theory help explain its journey so far?
Yeah, what's its relative advantage? How compatible is it? Is it simple enough? Can you try it easily? Can you see others benefiting? What might be speeding it up or slowing it down?
And where do you usually fall on that adopter curve? Are you an innovator, always first in line, or more of a late majority type waiting to see? Thinking about this can tell you a lot about how change happens around us and our own role in it.